well, we're very lucky to have Gary Evans with us, who's got an incredibly full schedule, which he'll tell you all about. But he's here to talk to us about the Forest Bathing Institute because he's one of the co-founders and the director. And they are doing some absolutely remarkable things. And, you know, fits totally with our mantra of love nature and live naturally, which you will see we've got a whole great new range of 60s inspired t-shirts coming out with that mantra on. But Gary, can you give us a little bit more on your background, because it looks to me like you've managed to take everything that you most love in life and put it into your day job.
Yes, that's a good way of putting it. And as it's been pretty much every day for the last 6 years, it's a good job that we love it. But it's definitely following the if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life philosophy, because of course it feels very rewarding. But in a nutshell, I picked up on forest bathing somewhere around 8 years ago, and there was almost nothing in England and the UK at that point. And on the honeymoon at the end of 2015 with my wife, basically we decided that we should really bring it to England. There was a number of reasons why it was such a beautiful enterprise in Japan. The things, first of all, they scaled it with local government help to help millions of people. So it seemed like if they could do that in Japan, there was a major opportunity in England and the UK to do something similar. But the real beauty was of this incredibly solid foundation of physiological science. Because I trained as a yoga teacher in India, and now I'm a meditation teacher of meditation teachers.
Oh, wonderful.
But you want that platform of science rather than, because if you go too far out with the speculation, maybe you go off course. So we really admired what they'd done in Japan, and there's like thousands of studies. There's been mass replication, and now we've taken it to a point where I'm engaging daily with universities. So we're in touch with about 20, 13 in the UK, 7 internationally, because we're becoming a bit of a hot spot in England, particularly for the Western Hemisphere, because so much has been done in South Korea and Japan.
That's amazing. I mean, I'm familiar with some of that research, but before we dive into some of the exciting things happening on the science front, can you just talk to our community about forest bathing? I love your website. I have such a passion and a connection with trees, and I could just look at some of those photographs for ages. But can you just sort of explain in a nutshell the ethos behind it and what it's going to do for you?
Yeah, so why forest bathing? So you could say it's mindfulness in nature, and we did a study on that subject recently. But when you're just coming into that still point in nature and observing it, just the feelings of peace and serenity and calm, which is like the antidote to the busy working life, just means a lot to myself and my wife, but all of us, because of the fast-paced nature of life, and just being there mindfully, really admiring the magnificence and the majesty of woodland or nature. We're increasingly going into parks and things to try and spread the message of the benefits. But if you just really just come to a stop and appreciate what's there, it gives back so much more than you can ever imagine. So it's just making that little bit of time, but it can really make a big difference to our stress levels, like by orders of magnitude. And that's really the key message. Just go into nature slowly and quietly, and then just soak in the beauty, and it will.
I think when you've been in that place where you know, you're out of yourself because of stress, because of worry, because of anxiety, it is quite challenging to just go into nature and manage to stop. And that's what I love about the forest bathing sessions, is it looks like you have a very structured approach to helping somebody come down and land again.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we ran when we launched in 2016. We were making changes for about the first 100 to 150 sessions, based because there's a lot of feedback from the participants. So yeah, you could say there's like the tense state, and then there's the calm place, but there's a journey between the two. It's not an on-off switch. You don't just decide to relax. So we wanted to try and make that journey smooth and accessible for everyone. So we've taken our version of forest bathing to the mainstream. So we work with government, NHS, majority of the major landowners across the country, and increasingly working towards clinical research for certain health conditions. But it doesn't have to be that complicated. So a lot of the people.
I was just going to say, so I suppose if someone comes for sessions, do they have a single session and then have a template to work with? Do they come for a series of sessions?
So what we've been running up to date has been one-off introductory sessions to try and, so anyone that comes on those sessions would leave with a few tools to use and on their own time. What we're currently putting in place for the NHS is a course of 6 sessions to try and help long-term positive change, because you might not necessarily be able to help more vulnerable people with a one-off session. But we've got a large team. I mean, we're sort of hovering around 80 to 100.
Really?
And
Oh, that's amazing.
Some internationally now as well. So each session is always different because the location, the climate, and the obviously the birds and animals and the trees that are there, each location is different. And then we encourage the team to really bring their personality through an intuitive approach to. So what would the group in front of me today appreciate? So based on who's in front of you and the conditions on the day, no 2 sessions will ever be the same.
And is it kind of sun, rain, wind, or shine?
Yeah, the only conditions that basically prevent forest bathing is lightning due to
Yes.
falling branches, and wind speeds of 30 mile an hour and above, same reason. But rain isn't too much of a problem. I'm now familiar with most of the different speeds of rain, including 3-hour forest bathing sessions, full speed torrential rain, where to hide under certain trees. But actually, the best time to go into the forest is after rain, because a lot of these beneficial chemicals we now know that are present are in higher numbers after rain and during rain. So it's a good time to go in and make the most of them.
You talk about beneficial chemicals, but also the autumn, because when we were talking offline before we started the interview, I mentioned that in my postgraduate training a number of years ago, we looked at all the research of Dr. Charles Raison, and he was looking at the effect of forest bathing, particularly from a microbial point of view, because he was working with healing depression. And so as a practitioner, and the many health professionals who will be watching this will be familiar with the fact that depression is very closely related to microbial imbalance and dysbiosis and gut health and all the rest of it. So Charles Raison has just been amazing in terms of his work and what he's pioneered, looking at the fact that, you know, in indigenous tribes, in our old life, you know, this relationship we had with the microbial world, our old friends, was very strong, and we've broken lots of those commensal lines of communication now, resulting in the very high inflammation rates that we see. So we were then looking at doing definitely not structured and not the way that you've pioneered it now, but working outdoors, particularly in the damp in the fall, because there's way more microbes that you can take to repopulate your microbiome. So I just wondered if that's sort of featured, that side of it's featured in any of your research.
Because of the damp conditions in the.
Or just the microbial side of forest bathing, and you know, and health in general from a more physical point of view.
So my current research is around the air chemistry and changes in the blood. That's the bit that I'm driving, because I was looking at the RHS that have been looking at the microbes in the soil, and they've been doing some research with cortisol saliva samples. And the other way that we've looked at the microbes in the soil is their potential to release serotonin when you're inhaling them. Because on the forest bathing sessions, the amount of people that have been transported back to grandmother's house when they're inhaling the forest earth from the floor, because when you're using the breath, it actually goes past the normal cognitive functioning straight into the limbic system. And when we were working with the University of Essex, they said, well, we work with army veterans with PTSD and sense of smell because you can go back to happier memories. So those are kind of the areas that we're currently looking at. But I think it's our view. The main point I'd encourage people to think about is our view of what's dirty.
Oh, yes, I'm right with you. Go on, you tell them.
Well, because of course some people come out of cities, and as we know, there's lots of pollution in cities covering everything. But then you might come into the countryside and it all looks dirty. But we now know, of course, that the dirt is very beneficial to us. And so, so breathing in, so when we're disconnected from those soil microbes and we're not breathing them in, the chances are that our immune system is being compromised. I mean, that's what the research now tells us.
Absolutely.
So it might be dirt, but actually it's incredibly beneficial. So it's another reason to be spending time in nature. So if you're gardening, and obviously when you're walking, you're kicking things up that you'd be inhaling. So any exposure, in theory, should be better than none.
I agree. I grew up in Africa, and a long time ago now, and certainly the whole hygiene hypothesis hadn't hit then, and it was just, we were in the mud all the time. In the winter we were the babies are all crawling around in the dirt, and it's just, I think it built very strong immune systems, and it's so necessary. So again, that's a big ANH message that we get out is shelve the anti-vax and get out in the dirt again.
Yes. So well, there'll be a lot more to come on that subject, but basically the initial research is showing us across multiple fronts is, of course, physiology developed in these environments, and we've gradually removed ourselves from those environments to the point where some people aren't exposed to the natural systems at all. But that potentially is compromising the immune system, but also depression and stress levels can increase because even having a house plant in an apartment in London has been shown to be more positive for someone than no nature present. So it's even a small amount can actually make a difference to our mental health and well-being. And I mean, I know what it gives me. I just don't know how I would be able to survive without my regular trips into nature. And I'm taking our 1-year-old baby out, and I'm thinking, I'm not sure how parents survive without using nature. Our rule is if mother can't keep him happy and father can't keep him happy, Mother Nature definitely can. Guaranteed result.
It's a result every time, though, isn't it?
Serenity, that's the word that comes. Yes, and which basically means, you let go of your stresses and feel untroubled, because that's how my heart feels when I go into nature.
But I think the sense of connection that it gives also gives you so much more of a sense of security and safety and belonging. And things are often missing in busy city modern lives, where people are then reaching for placebos, which are generally a lot less healthy. And we're so used to looking out the window, but the draw of the electronic devices and social media tends to mean, I think, that less people are getting outdoors. And so what you're doing is just remarkable, and the fact that you're in with the NHS and you're actually helping people who really need to experience this is amazing. I mean, can you tell us a bit more about that side of what you're doing?
Well, we're working, you could say, at very high levels in terms of with central government, and they've currently got a 5 million bid open for green social prescribing. So looking at how nature can be used with the current social prescribing system. And if anyone's not familiar with that, so it's like if you went to the doctor and they gave you medication, but they say you might also like to do, so like if you were stressed or something, some doctors might recommend yoga, mindfulness and Tai Chi, and of course mindfulness is widely available on the NHS. So you might get socially prescribed for other activities. We've already been accepted for social prescribing across Surrey. We're currently exploring how we get basically sort of larger numbers referred from the doctors' surgeries. But we've also got, so I've got multiple channels open at the moment, because it takes a long time to make things happen. But I'd say there's something like about 20 different avenues to people that are in need that we've got open at the moment. And I'm hoping to bring all of those online, I'd say, over the next 6 to 12 months. I mean, just lots of different people that we can like to help. But hypertension is a key area, because we've also tied up with Professor Lee in Japan, who's the sort of BBC go-to person, published books with Penguin, and he really spearheaded the physiological science of forest bathing, him and a couple of other figures in Japan. And he's now our scientific advisor. And so we're going to be working on research around children and clinical studies.
Wonderful.
With him. And potentially there's then going to be a cross flow back from England and the UK to Japan to help inform government policy there.
That is, you know, it's so what we need. I mean, we really have to clear the slate and bring in, you know, we need a whole new healthcare system, and nature's got to be at the centre of that. I'm thinking as well, I suppose it doesn't matter if you're in a wheelchair or anything. Have you managed to also do forest bathing for disabled people?
We've had people with different conditions, and like we're still on iPlayer running a group for young adults, including those with autism. But we have got team members lined up to run sessions for people that are in wheelchairs, because our model is that we would adapt our forest bathing sessions due to the people that are attending. So if you've got a group of people that are in wheelchairs, obviously you design it to be as beneficial for them as possible. So maybe they can't reach down and get the forest floor, but you could bring it to them. So that kind of adjustments. So you could still cross the main 4 senses, because we don't do too much with taste due to the health and safety nightmare.
Yes.
But it's definitely possible. In fact, I haven't actually come across anyone that I can think of that if they can get to the forest, we can run sessions. Maybe we need to make adaptations, because we've got NHS doctors and professional therapists and counsellors in our team that we've trained as guides. So the direction we're going is training people with specific skills to look after different people, give them the forest bathing skill set on top of that, and then those people should be in the best hands possible.
It sounds wonderful, and I've also seen that you've got a course running as well. So do you need to have any prior qualifications? We have a lot of health professionals in our community as well, so perhaps you could tell us a little bit more about the course.
Yeah, so we train people to be forest bathing guides, and so once they're trained, we can potentially give them paid work with the country's major landowners. That's how we've put it together. So we don't just train people and then say, okay, off you go and do your own thing. We've actually got a team all supporting each other. So there's 2 modules on our training. The first one is we train people to be a mindfulness and meditation teacher. That course is about how we're relating to people in a mindful way. And then the second course, which is the forest bathing guide course, is about how we use the environment to relax people. And that the course manual for that second course is 164 pages now. It's got to that point, but it's only really scratches the surface on a lot of the research we've done. But the key skill to be a forest bathing guide, you could say, is the sensitive soul.
Yes.
If you have experience of mindfulness and meditation, that's great. But some people will just pick it up very naturally and may learn it much quicker than me. So an interest and passion and sensitivity, I think, are the main, because we cross the two areas, the mental health crisis, which was already one before COVID. I've become increasingly concerned since COVID, but also, of course, the environmental destruction.
Yes.
Because part of what we're doing is saying, hey, look, nature has all of this to offer you. Look at the magnificence when you slow down, because you really stoke in the beauty. And I realised how underappreciated it was. And then there's the realization, wow, there's not much left. We need to protect what little is left. So a lot of us need to become part of the solution.
I think so, and relearn the appreciation. For those of us who love nature and go into it regularly, I mean, that's been the one absolute overriding joyful benefit of what happened last year in lockdown, is just seeing nature flourishing and regenerating. And I've got bees back in my garden again, and I haven't had bees in the last 7 years.
Mm.
So, this year when a hedge outside my front door burst into flower, I counted sort of 7 different species of pollinators on there, and I haven't seen that in years. So that's been a good thing. But I think we all need to start taking responsibility for the nature on our doorstep. And honestly, hasn't this island got some of the most beautiful nature anywhere in the world? I've travelled all over the world, and everywhere's got its special places.
Mm.
There is something about what we have on the doorstep here in the UK.
Yeah, well, there's a lot to be said about the lushness here, because
Yes.
I've also travelled extensively. Yeah, so the dry landscapes. After a while, when I was in California, I was like, wouldn't mind a rainy day today. Blue sky and sun, same thing every day. So yes, and of course our magnificent forests with their veteran trees, because we also talk about the benefits of ancient woodland.
Well, can you talk a little bit about that now?
So we've called our system of Forest Bathing Plus, and that was a name given to us by the University of Essex, because they said, oh, you're doing Forest Bathing Plus something, because we designed it to be like the most therapeutic form possible to integrate it into the NHS, because you can do forest bathing lots of different ways, but how does it help the most vulnerable in society? That was effectively our mission we set ourselves, because if you can help or give something to the most vulnerable in society, it should be more than good enough for everybody else.
Yes, totally.
So our forest bathing, so you've got this mindful approach to spending time in nature, which is the forest bathing. And in Japan, it depends on the guide you go with. So some people might just give you exercises and that's basically it. Others might be mindfulness and meditation teachers. So they're going to give you a much more sort of immersive, mindful experience. But that's our way of doing things as yoga and meditation teachers. So everybody that runs our forest bathing sessions does it in a very mindful way to accentuate the benefits of mindfulness in nature. So you get a consistent experience across the UK. Doesn't matter who from our team. So it's actually consistent,
Yes.
as opposed to Japan,
Yes.
you're going to get randomness.
Yes.
And then we also connected another arm of emerging science, which is called the Wood Wide Web, the original WWW. And that's so Professor Susan Simard at the University of British Columbia is normally the person that name's attributed to. But in ancient woodland, all of the trees are connected through the fungal network. Because Judi Dench is our patron, and she did a beautiful piece on the BBC, My Passion for Trees. If anyone listening wants to watch that. But the short version of a long story.
Link in underneath the video to that.
Yeah, the short version of a long story is we were given a model where a forest is survival of the fittest, all the trees are competing against each other. That's how human planted forests operate, not how Mother Nature grows forests. In a natural forest left to its own devices, all the trees link up under the forest floor. The big old veteran trees can actually distinguish between their own children, we now know from measuring radioisotopes and flow of carbon and sugars. So they look after their own children slightly better than they look after the neighbours' kids, but they still look after the neighbours' kids. The evergreen trees send carbon and sugars to the deciduous trees during winter to make sure they survive the winter. And at the height of summer, when the deciduous trees are photosynthesizing at max effect, they can send carbon and sugars to the evergreen trees to prepare them for winter. So when scientists look at this model, they say, okay, so the whole forest is supporting each other. And they came to the conclusion that the trees over hundreds of millions of years must have worked out that if they have sick and weak members of their society, that the whole society was weak. So let's make the whole society strong, and then it's more resilient to climate change and environmental conditions. So we have a model for our society, don't we?
Isn't that the most perfect post-pandemic model? You know, when we are looking at communities and strengthening communities, we're looking at more compassion and empathy and heart. And it's true though, isn't it? You know, your society is only as strong as your most vulnerable.
And we're a global society, as we now see with COVID.
Yes.
Yeah, so that increased international cooperation, obviously, to aid COVID is absolutely essential, because if you've got a huge pocket in one place on the planet, then the rest of the people are also vulnerable. So we already know the trees worked it out over hundreds of millions of years. They show us. Now it's time for our light bulbs to go off.
And to do the same thing,
Yeah.
because that's the stillness of the forest and that sense of connection. I know you've touched on one of my favorite books, The Secret Life of Trees. I'm going to put a link to that in this as well, because I think everybody should read it. Have you been to that forest in Germany that he writes about?
No, I have spoken to Peter when he was at Kew Garden, so I'd like to pay him a visit. But the subject of connection, because there was like a meme on the internet. There's no mobile signal in the forest, but there's a much better connection.
Yeah.
That one sums it. Much better connection to self and everything else. And there's an interesting paper that my head of research dug out, Transcendental Experiences in Forests. But we were doing some studies with the University of Derby. We actually had people on heart rate monitors, and they were doing massive amounts of psychometric questions. But one person said this was transformational. So for them, they'd gone from perhaps this very stressed state where they're looking at problems very closely to this much bigger perspective where it feels like you get a lot more clarity on your life. I've had those kind of reports from across the country, because I've run sessions like at RSPB reserves across England, and the common theme that comes up when we get stressed and it all feels a bit kind of overwhelming and we all kind of crouch down with the pressure, then when we get into nature and looking at a huge tree, which we get that kind of sense of awe. Sometimes it puts the problems into perspective. Other times it might give us a different perspective on the problem to resolve it. And of course, it means a lot to people when you're feeling overwhelmed. Suddenly you get, a bit of a break and a fresh perspective. That's very meaningful.
I think what trees do for us as well is that they land us in the present moment. And when you're in the present moment, suddenly things do come into perspective. So yes, I mean, I guess you're taking people. It is forest bathing, and you must be taking people into all different environments. But for me, there's nothing as healing as walking into a forest. And these huge beech forests, these European forests over here, are so different to what I grew up with in Africa, which has its own beauty. But it's the ancient nature of it as well. A bit like the redwoods in California, in North
Yeah.
California. Oh my goodness, they have an energy too. But I'm aware that I can't keep you for too long. I feel like I could talk to you for ages, and I'm actually
Oh,
really desperate to do a session. When you were, well, Philip, who was running one of your team not so long ago, but I was unfortunately unable to attend. So I'm going to jump on one of the next ones.
okay. You'll be welcome as our guest anytime.
It would just, I would absolutely love it. And also, we do put on events for our members as well. And I'd love to talk to you about doing something, for our members that
Hmm.
the ones that can actually, get to this area quite easily. But for another time. So, Gary, how do people find you? How do they? I mean, have you got events running all over the place? Is it sitting on the website? Um, what's the next step?
Um, well, the main website is tfb.institute, Tango Foxtrot Bravo.institute. So you can go to the events tab and then it'll take you through to Eventbrite. So yeah, there's a large amount running in Surrey, but we've also got other locations, and that event program is expanding rapidly back to its former glory, because unfortunately, of course, COVID made everything very difficult. I mean, if you're interested in the training, we do like a Q&A Zoom where I give a little presentation on our the history and the science and what everything that we're working on and what it involves the training. People can ask questions. So that's kind of the training pathway. And yeah, you can see us on iPlayer. I mean, if you look at our website, there's plenty of content on there, including the university studies, because I am a peer-reviewed author and researcher. I should probably have said that earlier, but there you
I
go.
I should have said that too. I did know that as well, but I got so taken with all the trees. Honestly, trees do something incredible to me. But I would ask everyone to visit the website, and you don't need to be a practitioner to be able to train. You can start off doing this, but I I really think in this post-pandemic world, our connection to nature is going to help our connection to our communities, and it's going to help us to emulate what the trees are doing and make much stronger, more symbiotic um, communities. So I would urge you to have a look at Gary's site. Gary, thank you so much. I'm really grateful. I know how busy you are, and you've spared some time for us. So we hope that you're going to see an influx of people coming onto the website, and if nothing else, just getting outdoors.
That's it. Thank you very much. Yeah,
Thank you
appreciate
so
the
much for being
opportunity.